I see the despair in Israel in a way to establish peace with the Arab countries and to solve the Palestinian problem. So much has been done, so many things have been tried, and yet it seems almost impossible at this point to change the actual situation. Do you see any hope at this point for peace in the Middle East? I mean,
there's always hope, but you make a mistake if you act on your hopes and your dreams and not on reality, and that's what happened because, you know, think about the situation of 3 million Jews sitting in the, you know, or 5 million Jews in Israel sitting surrounded by 300 million Arabs. You want to hope. I mean, what else is there but, you know, a hope or an absolute determination to fight and fight and fight and fight every day? And who wants to do that? You want to live your life. And so you make concessions and you make concessions. Now the left in Israel has crumbled because they've given almost every concession that they can possibly give, and they find that, you know, the Palestinian Authority and the Arabs teach their children to hate Jews, to kill Jews. There's not much hope right now, and especially now the Arab Spring, so-called, has led not to democracy with these overthrowing of these dictators, but to kind of an Islamic fascism. That's going to be even worse, perhaps.
Well, the Obama administration has voiced its support for these initiatives in the Middle East to break the yoke of many of these dictatorships. And, you know, in a sense, I can see the logic behind this because, in a way, it might represent hope. If these Arab cultures and communities see the United States and Europe helping them to break the yoke of these oppressive dictatorships, then the hope would be that a lot of the anti-Western sentiments that have animated terrorism would be placated, and somehow it would project a different image of the West. Do you think that we're having success in that through the efforts of America?
That's not what happened at all, because that was the hope, you're right. But the reality in the Arab world is that a certain kind of radical Islam, or Islam, has more hold on people than, you know, than neutral information or democratic heritage or hopes even. And that the only people who were really organized to take over power after Mubarak was overthrown, and it looks like in the case of Libya after Gaddafi was overthrown, and everybody's afraid that in Syria, if Assad is overthrown, is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood is the biggest threat to not just the Jews, although they target us first, but to the Christians. You know, I was recently invited to speak to a Christian group, a Christian college, Gordon College here. And the event was a commemoration of Kristallnacht, when the Jews were first attacked in Europe. And I explained that we Jews are very, very happy that Christians are on our side. It's a miracle. It's a blessing. I love it. You know, I proclaim it to my people all the time. Look at our new friends. But I said to these Christians, you know, you're doing this for some kind of altruistic reason. You're helping the other. We're the other. You're helping the other. It's good. It's good. But guess what? You just had your own Kristallnacht in Cairo. How many of you know, and they didn't know, how many of you know that Christians are being killed and massacred in Cairo as we speak, and that the Christian community in Syria is terrified what will happen if Assad, their protector, goes, and that the Christians in Iraq have been totally decimated? How many Christians know that Christianity used to be 20% of the Middle East, and now it's like 3 or 4% because they are attacked?
There's ethnic cleansing taking place in so many of these countries. Really, just get the Christians out and
So Christians have a reason to be with Jews, not only because we're, you know, you want to be on the right side and justice and you want to do something for people who you think are the root of Christianity, which we love and understand, but you have actually a more compelling reason to be with us, and that is that we're both targets of the jihad.
And you know, you do see these radical elements increasing. To me, one of the most illuminating examples of this is Turkey, which for a long time has been a more secular nation. It has been very open to women's participation in society. They made a bid for inclusion in the European Union.
Right.
It seemed like one of these nations that could stand as an example of how an Arab nation could remain true to its culture and at the same time adopt some really good values of cultural collaboration with the West and so on and so forth. But what we see now is an increasing radicalization of this nation, more and more toward Islamic extremism, and the concern of many of these more moderate segments of Turkish society really being afraid that slowly this Muslim extremist segment of the country is taking over, and that pretty soon they're going to be sort of pushed aside as well. So you see this kind of tendency. It's not for greater openness, but on the contrary, more radicalization.
And the failure of secular
persecution of Christians, among other things as well.
Yeah, I mean, the persecution of Christians is a result of this falling. I mean, it's the saddest thing in the world that Turkey, which was a secular society, Ataturk, beat back the Muslim extremists and established secular democracy in Turkey. And now it's going backward. Those forces are losing and have lost, and again, the Muslim radicals are taking over. It's the saddest possible thing in the world. I saw this. I worked in Sudan. Now, Christians know this story more. In Sudan, which is Africa's biggest country, the north of Sudan is Arab Muslim, and the south is African Christian, mostly. Okay? There was a jihad declared against the southern Christians by the northern Arab Muslims. 1989, they killed 3 million Christians. The world didn't open not a peep. Nobody said a thing. They sent raiders to African Christian villages to shoot the men and capture the women and children and take them as slaves. Slaves. So I started an anti-slavery group to inform the world and to scream the world awake about this. I went to Sudan with a Christian group, the Heroes, Christian Solidarity International. You should know them. You should bring them. They're the most brave people I've ever met. And they were getting the slaves out. They were paying for them out. They were figuring ways to get the slaves out. And I have film. I went there, and I interviewed Christians who had been liberated, emancipated from slavery, telling the stories about what happened to them. All because of this holy war. All because of this holy war. And now finally, South Sudan split off and became the newest nation in the world, and it's a new Christian nation, and it's an ally of Israel.
Well,
it's a perfect symbol of what we can do together.
Two thoughts occur to me as I hear you saying this. Number one, I noticed earlier in our conversation you said something like Islam / Islamic extremism. I detected a kind of a hesitation there in the sense of, and I interpreted it as saying, well, in the West we draw this distinction between Islamic extremism and Islam as a doctrine, a religion, faith that is not necessarily extremist. But what I sensed in you was a certain amount of hesitation, and I see this in other circles where the idea is Islam itself a faith and a doctrine? Are the Quran and the Islamic scriptures and the Islamic faith, does it inherently lend itself to the kind of violence, the kind of aggressiveness, let's say slavery, for example, and other things? Or is it simply that Islam has been hijacked by some extremist elements and deformed? Because here you are saying this country, Islam has promoted slavery and ethnic cleansing and so on in Sudan, and you've been very active, so you have an insight into that that perhaps I don't. How would you respond to that?
Well, this is a very difficult question, and the anti-jihad movement in the world is divided between those who say, well, we don't want to say it's Islam, right?
And there's a little bit of political correctness probably in that as well.
There might be a little bit of political, and those who say, let's focus on the political aspect of Islam because that way you can do something. If you say it's Islam, wow. And I also happen to know that there are moderate Muslims, and on my board, the Americans for Peace and Tolerance, which I run, I have a sheikh who is an authentic reformist Muslim who claims that he can read the Quran in ways that make it peaceful and don't teach people to kill apostates, Jews, Christians, gays, women, etc. So I think there is a possibility that there are reformist Muslims, and I also think, however, that Islam has not gone through the Enlightenment like Judaism and Christianity has gone through, certain ways of seeing things a little bit metaphorically instead of literally. So I'm on the side of those Muslims who want to be moderate, and that's the most important thing to do. I'm not a scholar of Islam. I know that there are many things in the Quran that are worrisome. I'm hoping, and I know that there are some Muslims who interpret them in ways that are not so worrisome.